Hi everybody, welcome back to Making Stuff with Mr. Hoon. This video series, this YouTube channel, is dedicated to my Big Sky High School students. Taking Intro to Art, Drawing 1, Painting 1, Ceramics 2, with me, Mr. Hoon. I know it's true that we can no longer really have our interactive studio where we're having a dialogue, where there's discussion, where there's constant feedback, give and take. But we can do the next best thing, and that is this virtual reality instruction, where you'll receive some of it via YouTube. And I'm also going to have a Google Classroom for all of my classes. And it's true that this YouTube channel is public, so anyone can watch it. I won't be responding to the comments on YouTube. I'll be responding to my students in Google Classroom. So we're going to take like a 4-tier approach to education here during this challenge that our world is facing with this pandemic. And that is using YouTube for skill instruction, for transmission of ideas, for hearing old Mr. Hoon's voice. We're also going to be using mass emails for communication, even some text. We're going to be using that Google Classroom format. And also, we're going to make sure that you get supplies into your hands. And we as a school, as a community, as a district, are working hard on how to honor the governor's protocol and directive to shelter in place, but also have materials available for pickup and in some cases personally delivered. But we'll cross that bridge as we come to it next week. In the meantime, let's just share some art ideas, and you can work in your sketchbook with me. This particular episode is dedicated to my Intro to Art kids. So I wanted to take a minute of review to get your head back in the game a little bit. I'm going to look down here. If I hold this up, many of you are instantly going to remember what we left for spring break having done. And this right here is an exploration of color theory. Underneath here we have an analogous, rather warm color scheme. All done in colored pencil underneath. The challenge was to apply a really waxy, thick coat and then dark oil pastels over the top using scratch techniques that show intricate pattern and detail. So, a lot of things going on. I'm just going to show you a couple more and I'll remind you of some expectations. Okay? Just kind of randomly grabbing some from the floor of my studio here. Notice what the artist chose to leave exposed and uncovered by the oil pastel. Notice what the artist chose to scratch out. The combination of colored pencil, oil pastel, and scratch pattern can make for a very compelling image. Now, I think it's important, and there's a lot more, there's over 100. I think it's important to remind you that I will accept any late work. If you want to improve on work and respond to my feedback, which you'll get in Google Classroom or maybe through an email, if you want to do that, you can take as many photographs of your work and then upload it to the Google Classroom so that I can respond to it. As far as I'm concerned, this experience with Mr. Hoon and making stuff with Mr. Hoon is about your personal growth. It's about your aptitude now and your commitment to improving your aptitude. We're not grading people against each other here. This is an experience where we're all expected to grow. And in the visual arts, it takes practice, just like it takes practice shooting hoops in front of a basketball hoop. to get the balls in the hoop. It takes practice and skill building when we're dealing with some of these techniques. Speaking of techniques, I'm going to switch gears a little bit here and actually have a camera angle that shows my sketchbook. We'll talk a little bit about what we see there. So I'm going to reach up here and let's just... So as you can see, the camera angle is now looking at my old sketchbook here. This is one of my instructional sketchbooks that I use at the head of the classroom. I'll have learning targets in here, techniques. Sketchbook's such a wonderful thing because it's a portable record of your experience. It's a place where you can take notes. All of my intro to art students are expected to have one. And if they can't get their hands on one for whatever reason, I'm going to find a way to get them one. But they should all have them one by now. The reason I have this out is we're going to explore a little bit of linear perspective. Now, linear perspective is something in terms of a skill that children will experience in middle school art classes. And in the high school art classes, linear perspective, just like any medium, becomes more sophisticated, more complex. So, I love that cheeseburger analogy. You have a cheeseburger at McDonald's. Yes, it's got the same ingredients as a cheeseburger at a 5-star restaurant, but chances are the chef that cooks at the 5-star restaurant is going to make an outstanding cheeseburger that is vastly superior to one at McDonald's, even though it still tastes good at McDonald's. And like that, you can think many of the art techniques may first have been explored in an elementary school setting or a middle school setting, but you just keep getting more complex introductions, lesson planning with experience and time. In linear perspective, the roots of it, 1-point, 2-point perspective often taught in middle school. We're going to move up to 3 points. So here's your expectation. I'm hoping that you actually try. Let's face it, I expect you to try with me. After all, as we move into this remote online learning or homebound learning, much of the way that students' grades are assessed and evaluated is changing. It's still based on standards, but for right now, I'm just looking for effort, okay? For effort. I'm going to be looking for you to photograph your work and name it. Always sign it on the front, but also in the document that you would put in on Google Classroom as the title of your digital file of the photograph of your work. So as you can see here, we have the 4 basic forms in nature. We have the rectangular prism, a solid. We have the cylinder here. We have cone. We have a sphere. Here you have atmospheric perspective going from dark to light. And again, these things are review for most of us who've taken courses with Mr. Hoon, as we've covered a little bit of this. This was done with water-soluble pencil or watercolor pencil. I also think it's important to remind people at home that many times we think about YouTube as a place where you got a problem, you look up how to solve it. And this is true. I use YouTube for that. Or in some cases, you're just following a YouTuber. You like a certain channel for content, for humor, for reviews, for unboxing, whatever. And we're going to use YouTube as a tool of learning that transcends. In other words, it goes above and beyond the typical, hey, here's a trick. Let me show you how to do the trick. You could think of it simply that way, that I'm showing you an illusion, right? After all, this is a flat piece of paper, right? But I'm showing you or attempting to show you how to create an illusion of depth, the illusion of the third dimension on a picture plane. But that has origins. So I want to introduce you to this idea that Every experience we have in life is influenced. It is subject to influence. And here's what I mean by that. We are individuals, that's true, but we have families. And those families have cultures. And those family cultures exist in a community, like Missoula. Communities have laws, and they're in a place. It's very place-based. We know what Missoula feels like, what it smells like, what it looks like. And then Missoula is connected to a larger community, the state. And of course, there's legalities and laws there. Where am I going with this? What I'm saying is, who we are, what time we live, that makes up the context for our understanding. So what we choose to look at, what we choose to consume, and in our case in art, what we choose to make is going to be influenced by our culture and our society and our times. So when I'm showing you a specific technique like this linear perspective, which really took off during the 1400s, the 15th century in Europe, I'm going to tell you that this discipline, this learning style, it came out of a very Eurocentric experience, meaning European-centered. And we have it now as a result of, let's face it, the Dark Ages, the collapse of society for 1,000 years, and then through warfare, through the conquests of Jerusalem, throwing some history at you, you have mixing of cultures, and where mathematics and science was preserved in, let's pick up this handy dandy globe, where mathematics was preserved during the Dark Ages. We're talking about roughly from 500 AD or CE to, 1200 AD. We have here in the Middle East, you have the preservation of science. Whereas during the Dark Ages in Europe, infant mortality, constant warfare, sadness, famine, woe, sadness, sorrow, dog eat dog, cutthroat. So because of that depression, if you will, there's also a depression of knowledge, of wisdom, of understanding, and the repositories of understanding, the place where knowledge and understanding and science and secular understanding is actually preserved. Ironically enough, that secular understanding of the world is preserved by the Catholic Church. And then from the orders of the Catholic Church to invade the Holy Land in the Middle East, you have this transfer of knowledge, science, mathematics, linear perspective, back to Europe. So many of you have heard of this term, the Renaissance. Well, it didn't only take place in Italy. However, the Italian Renaissance is amazing. You also find Renaissance, the Northern Renaissance, in what is now Holland, the Netherlands, Germany. And that spreads throughout. So when I say Eurocentric, I mean European-centered. If I was going to be talking about cave painting from Lascaux, France, that's European, but it's not necessarily Eurocentric, because you're going to find that kind of cave painting from 35 to 50,000 years ago in Australia too. So the phenomenon is just as important. The idea is just as important as the place. I think that place-based thinking is really important to education. We shouldn't just think of education as facts and figures. We should think of it as experience too. And also, a good understanding of history enables us to understand what we're attempting to learn a little bit better, if not a lot better. So, history is integral to visual art, or at least a deeper understanding that goes beyond your next Pinterest video or cake decorating. But I digress. We're talking about linear perspective, trying to show depth on a flat surface, trying to trick the viewer like we're a magician creating an illusion for the viewer. In Intro to Art, my students are constantly exposed to the 7 elements of art: space, form, shape, texture, color, value. And I think, oh, is this darn thing on? I can't stand it when it times out like that. I'm sorry. I apologize. I think that when we look at, just had a technical problem. When we look at these elements of art, it's important to focus on a few that seem to really stand out. I can hear my little daughter run around. What's up, Jillian? Home-based learning, peeps. Home-based learning. So, all right, we'll pause just for a second. Yes, Jillian? What's on your mind, kiddo?
So, every comment.
What? You know I'm teaching right now.
Where's Mom then?
She's probably in the garden or with the goats. I'm sorry, young ones, or everybody. Getting back to it. As I was saying, elements of art are ways of looking, ways of seeing. Ways of talking about art, ways of understanding art. In this particular linear perspective approach, we're dealing a lot with line, with space. Since we're dealing with the illusion of depth, we're also dealing with form and shape. Now, all of them operate in a drawing. Texture, value and color if you choose to use it. But those are really anchor understandings, anchor elements: space, form, shape, line. These things are integral to an understanding of the illusion of the third dimension on a flat surface or a flat picture plane. Now let's just turn a page and look at another example again. Do a little bit of drawing. What do you say? Sounds good to me. Now again, next week, schools, the community is going to be working really hard. I'm going to be working hard on getting materials into your hands. But right now, since we're material light, so to speak, just using a regular pencil is going to work for you. But if you've taken a class from Mr. Hoon, you know that it's really important that you understand when you're sketching an image, you want to just lightly sketch the surface like you're scratching the surface. I mean, what's the point of going on here with a pencil and being all like, I'm going to dig right off. Now, how are you going to erase that? So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying sketch lightly, just scratch the surface. And when you're confident with the line, then you can go back in there and reinstate that line. Also, if you've taken a class with Hoon before, you know that using light H graphite pencils is best for sketching initially, because H, you might think of it as hard. Hard graphite leaves less of itself behind, so it's lighter. It's a lighter form of gray. Don't use very much pressure. Now, our eye level and the eye level of the audience of our drawing is going to be the horizon line. So you can sketch a horizon line. And notice I'm not even using a ruler. You might want to use a ruler. We're going to use rulers for our orthogonal lines here pretty soon. But I'm just sketching it in lightly because we're going to totally cover this space up completely. and leave very little white left behind. So what I'm going to be looking for over the next 2 instructional weeks is this. An example of linear perspective showing me 2-point perspective, 1-point perspective with rectangular solids, spheres, and cylinders, and cones on a page. Then we're going to graduate up to 3-point perspective. That's right, 3-point perspective. I'm going to show you how to combine forms using 3-point perspective and all of the interest and dynamism that can show in an imaginary, illusory environment like the picture planes we're going to create. So really we're going to be looking at 2 drawings, and you'll be submitting photographs of those 2 pieces over the next 2 weeks. So again, we're taking it slow. And that was no trick of the camera. That was just me slowing it down. Anyway, so right now, I'm going to get back in here. I've got this horizon line, and the horizon line is more than just a line. It's like, oh, we go to the horizon line, we'll fall off the edge of the earth. It's your eye level. As I stand at 6 foot 2 inches and 1/4, my horizon line, or my eye level, people, is going to be different than my wife's. You know, she's 5'4", 5'5". So how she sees the world is going to be different. And objects that are placed on the ground, on the plane we call it, she's going to see either more or less of those objects than me based on her relationship to the objects and her relationship to her own horizon line. The horizon line is the first thing that I create when I'm attempting linear perspective. Now, since we're talking about linear perspective, and I'll just write it up here. You know, you actually break the word linear down. I realize that may be difficult for you to see. You break the word linear down, it's basically linear. And that's because linear perspective deals with line primarily and uses that contour line to describe objects in space relative to horizon line and vanishing points. Now, as I move along, I'm going to be throwing information at you, and we're going to see if you can catch it. I'm going to slow down. Linear, linear, perspective, viewpoint, understanding. So linear perspective, showing objects, you know, starting with the 4 basic objects in space, or the illusion of a 3-dimensional space on a flat surface. Now, let's get the ball rolling. No pun intended. Now, I'm going to step away from this a little bit, just real quick, and I'm going to grab a ruler so that I can use my orthogonals. My what? My orthogonal lines. What are those, Mr. Hoon? I'll tell you. Orthogonal lines are mathematical lines. In geometry, an orthogonal line is a line that describes angles in space. In our linear perspective art, I want you to think of an orthogonal line, an orthogonal line, as a descriptive line that defines the object in space. And if we're dealing with a rectangular prism, it's going to have a vanishing point. Let me explain. It's a good idea to put your vanishing points and I'll mark mine as X's, as far off to the sides. As a matter of fact, if I had a drawing board and I wasn't working in a sketchbook, I'd probably put my vanishing points on the drawing board outside the paper. Why? Because as the vanishing points move toward the center of the picture plane, the image that you're attempting to draw and describe becomes more concave or convex. It appears more distorted. It's like a fishbowl effect. So I'm going to take this ruler and we're going to start, actually, paradoxically, we're going to start with 2-point perspective. We're going to work on a rectangular prism, or a box, if you will, in 2-point perspective. 2-point perspective, let me think about this. 2-point perspective actually has less types of lines than 1-point perspective. How is that possible? That doesn't seem right. Well, let's check it out. Now, first of all, our box, or rectangular prism, or solid, is going to be sitting below the horizon. So, first thing I'm going to do is sketch a vertical line that's parallel to the sides of the page. The next thing I'm going to do, and that's my first line, if I were you, I would just count how many steps. Some of us have brains that really helps. We're counters. We like to count step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Some of us really absorb experience in different ways. Some of us are visual learners. Some of us learn auditorily with our ears better. Some of us have to touch. We're tactile learners. But I'm going to say that if you just count with me, this is my second line. This is what I like to call my upside down arrow. And moo. So how many lines we got? We've got 3 lines. Boom, boom, shakalaka. 3 lines. All right. So these 3 lines do describe the bottom edge and the closest edge of what will be the illusion of a box in 2-point perspective, linear perspective, science, mathematics, surviving the Dark Ages through the Islamic caliphates and the Catholic Church. Yeah, take that one to the bank. That's a fact, Jack. Now, as we go over here, let's get the top. I try to make it so that my orthogonal lines, again, the descriptor lines that vanish at a vanishing point, they describe the shape. I try to find the same area on the point every time so that I have more accuracy. Now we truly have 2 sides of this object. And this is really important, that this closest line corner is parallel to the sides of the page. Now, hint, hint, this is what's interesting. There are only orthogonal lines that vanish at a vanishing point and vertical lines in a 2-point perspective rectangular solid. That's right. There are 2 types of lines, orthogonals and verticals. Now, I see kids and adults all the time. They're like, oh, I'm going to draw a box. Oh, drew a box. No. I mean, you've got vertical lines are parallel to each other. That means they're going to be parallel to the sides of the page. Take great pains in making sure that your lines are parallel. Now, I'm going to leave that mistake there. I'm not going to freak out and be all like, I've got to erase that like right now or my drawing's going to be messed. No. Take a moment. Just say, hey, it's going to be okay. Leave mistakes behind because they're all going to get covered up with shading and values. Now, where you choose to put these sides, if you will, are really up to you. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines. So far, this rectangular prism is only made up of 7 lines. How many lines do you think I'm going to have when I'm done to make the box? Well, let's find out. This top part, a lot of people call the diamond. I'm not a lot of people, I just call it the top part. Go to that vanishing point, and now from this corner to its opposite vanishing point, and you have the top of the box. Now let's actually count the lines. So just like you can check a mathematical equation, you can check your math on this. You can check your geometry on this. You can check the construction of this illusion by knowing that if it's a rectangular solid, and it's solid, there's no lid open up or anything like that, it's just a box, you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines. That's it. 9 lines, man. 9 lines. If you got 10, it might be wrong. No, it is wrong. Unless you've got some kind of a lid on it or you're doing other things. You're modifying the box. If it's the simple box in 2-point perspective, peeps, 2, count them, 2, then you're going to have 9 lines that make up that object. That's right, 9 lines that make up that object. No, we're not going to get into shading. I'll leave that to my next video for you intro humans, intro to art. I think, though, this would be a good opportunity to do a 1-point perspective box floating in the air. Oh, he's crazy, man. He's crazy, dude. No. I'm an art teacher, and I know a few things. I hope you pick up on them. The 1-point perspective is this. It's like you're looking straight on at the object. And so we're tempted to have the 1-point perspective vanishing point somewhere in the center or close to the center. Even though we have stereo vision, meaning 2 eyes, most of us, and if we close one eye, it's going to slightly shift the way the picture looks. We're going to want that 1 point somewhere in the center. Because if we put it over here, it's going to start, or even over here, it's going to start getting somewhat confusing when we go back and forth. It's doable, but let me start my first one roughly in the center. So I'll put a vanishing point, and again, this is 1-point perspective rectangular solid. 1-point perspective. See if I can get that camera a little bit closer. Ooh, just a little bit closer. And we got to worry about that closeness when we're talking COVID-19, peeps. But I am going to enjoy making stuff with you on YouTube. I am going to miss you kids, though. Crying my pillow at night. I'm just kidding. All right. This next step. When I make that box, I'm going to have a horizontal line that hovers above the vanishing point, and it's horizontal and parallel to the horizon. Okay? Horizontal and parallel to the horizon. Now, I'm going to use orthogonals to vanish at the vanishing point. Yeah? Triangle now. Look at that triangle go. Whoa! Now here, watch this. For my 4th line, this will describe the depth of the box. Another horizontal parallel line. What? Yeah, that's right. Now, we know that in a 2-point perspective box, we've got 1 vertical line, vertical line, vertical line. And then we've got 2 orthogonal line, orthogonal line. Those are the only 2 types of lines in the box. But with a 1-point perspective box, paradoxically, we have more types of lines. We've got horizontals that are parallel. We've got orthogonals, and now we have verticals. So we have one more type of line in a 1-point perspective drawing. And these verticals need to be, or should be, as parallel to each other as possible, or they're going to look cattywampus. What did he just do? Well, I made contour lines. I made horizontals. I drew vertical marks. I drew orthogonal lines. That's all I did. But he's kind of looking like a buck. Yeah. But all I did was draw some lines, kids. Now, what can you do? Now, we're not even dealing with light source yet. And forget about, like, cleaning things up and getting rid of orthogonals when we don't need them anymore. Hey, let's use that vanishing point, that 1-point vanishing point, to shoot another box our way. What do you say? I'm going to put this one a little bit lower maybe and smaller. Horizontal line. What? Chicken butt. Vertical line, I'm going to do it differently. Just going to make the box. Some people like to do it like this. What? Are you crazy? He's crazy. So we know we got horizontal lines, vertical lines, right? The third one would be orthogonal lines. A zoom. A boom. No, wait, is that complete? It's even a little bit off, I'd say. Is this complete? What am I doing? Talking to a camera? No one can answer. No, it's not complete. I've got to put this down here. A diggity-doo. Is it complete? No, no. Not unless it is the infinite box. No, it's not complete, peeps. I've got to put another parallel vertical and another parallel horizontal for the complete box. And forget about shading right now. Forget about shading. So we've got 2-point, beam, boom, and 1-point. So both of them can be used in the same picture plane because objects, if they're just boxes, they can be moved in all different directions. So understanding linear perspective and orthogonal lines, parallel lines, vertical lines, and horizontal lines, understanding the hardness of the graphite in your pencil, understanding these things is a first step in creating a convincing illusion in the true Renaissance style of creating a picture plane with depth. Now, right now, I'm going to sign off. Now, don't you worry. I'm going to come back to you with Google Classroom and all kinds of stuff. Intro to Art, I'm right there with you. Other movies that are going to be coming out or videos are going to be for Painting 1, Drawing 1, Ceramics 2. You're welcome to watch all of them, but you're only Intro to Art. You're only focusing on linear perspective with me as our first objectives going into this pandemic and at-home, homebound learning methodology. So I want to thank you for listening to me. I wish I could hear your voices, your laughs, your laughter. I wish I could pick your brain. But we'll see each other again, and I hope you get something out of this. And teach your families too. Later.